G'day everyone, and welcome back. Also a big welcome for those of you who are new to the channel. I was hoping to get to this sooner, but then what a weekend we've had. Certainly lots of positive things going on in Australian rugby right at the moment. And a big shout out to the Western Sydney Two Blues, who had their first win against one of the powerhouse clubs of the Shute Shield, Sydney University, since 1998. And speaking of positives, Rugby Australia released their annual report on Friday. From a $27 million loss in 2020, they've seen that drop to only a $4.5 million loss in 2021, so a significant improvement on what was still a COVID-affected year. Being the accountant that I am, and also having written about Rugby Australia's finances with colleagues at UTS and Deakin, see link in the description, I thought it warranted a look. So let's dive in, shall we? The $98.6 million in revenue RA recognised in 2021 was a 49% increase on the $66 million recognised in 2020. Whilst obviously the right direction, putting it into perspective, this is the second lowest revenue recorded by RA since 2015, when they only recorded $86 million. If you're wondering what the spikes are in 2003 and 2013, I think the dates give it away, and indicates just how important the 2025 Lions Tour and hosting the 2027 Rugby World Cup will be. Delving into revenue some more, Rugby Australia primarily earns revenues from broadcast, match day, and sponsorship. In 2021, these three items were approximately 87% of total revenue. In 2021, RA's broadcast revenue was $40 million, up 58%. This is a good outcome, although still some way off the 60-odd million they were receiving between 2016 and 2018. Sponsorship is up 45% to $22.4 million. Whilst an improvement, it is at its lowest level since 2011. Lastly, match day, and this was up 21% to $15.8 million. The peak in 2013 is the Lions Tour, whilst the dips in 2015 and 2019 coincide with reduced non-Rugby World Cup test matches during Rugby World Cup years. I've included other for completeness, and the spikes in 2015 and 19 relate to revenue from World Rugby in relation to the World Cups, whilst 2017 was additional government funding. Next year, RA will recognise revenue from World Rugby for the 2023 Rugby World Cup, but they've already received approximately $13 million of this in cash already. Turning to operating expenditure, and there was an overall increase in expenditure of 12.7% to $101 million. In relation to team costs, whether Super Rugby through grants to the franchises or high performance teams or the Wallabies, the increase in costs comes in around 8%. Matchday costs saw an increase of 18.6%, which makes sense given more activity going on in relation to match attendance last year than in 2020. Community expenditure increased 56% to $6.2 million, which is good to see, although may reflect that the community expenditure was cut more heavily in 2020, coming from 2019. Other costs increased 10.9% to $37.7 million. Now, annoyingly, RA changed their classification system this year, which meant that expense line items don't map from previous years into 2021. The reconciliation they do provide, unfortunately, doesn't really help too much in this regard. The overall impact has been to reduce the number of expense line items. Now, the balance sheet makes slightly more somber reading. I'm going to focus on the liability side of things here as the story is more interesting. Total assets increased 4.3%, whilst total liabilities increased 20.1%. This leaves them with net assets reducing from a negative $7.4 million to negative $11.9 million. Whilst their payables position has improved from the $23.3 million owing to only $12.9 million, the drivers of the liability increase are the following. The first is deferred revenue. Now, deferred revenues occur when an organization receives the cash before they've done whatever it is required to do to earn the revenue. The example I always use are plane tickets, if you happen to remember those. Now, airlines don't book the revenue when you buy the ticket, they book the revenue when you fly. Until then, it is a liability for them, as they owe you a flight. Now, overall deferred revenue increased nearly $7 million. This increase is primarily driven by $4.8 million in relation to the 2027 Rugby World Cup bid grant and $1.2 million for sponsorship. Financial liabilities saw an overall increase of $10 million to $36.2 million. Before we turn to what's going on here, it's important to note that whilst RA currently have liabilities greater than their assets, the directors have declared that there are reasonable grounds to believe that the group will be able to pay its debts as and when they become due and payable. So they believe it's okay. And now we turn to note 15, financial liabilities. Turns out that not only the directors believe that things are going to be okay, but somebody else does too. During 2021, the HSBC loan was repaid, so the nearly $6.9 million that they owed at the end of 2020 is gone. In its place, however, is a $19.5 million loan note as part of an overall $40 million borrowing facility. As documented in the financials, this carries an interest rate of 7% above the Australian bank bill swap reference rate. Talking to someone with markets experience, this is on the high side and likely reflects the position rugby was in at the time. In addition, the financials go on to note that all present and after acquired property, interests and rights and proceeds in respect of which Rugby Australia has been used as collateral against the loan note. When discussing this on Friday, Hamish McClellan and Andy Marinos were bullish on the future for RA. And to be fair, lots of things are heading in the right direction, but it's not all blue skies and clear sailing yet. I am optimistic about the future for the sport in Australia, and I'm really hoping the decisions that are being made keep on working out. If you've made it this far, thanks for watching. If you'd like to support what I'm doing here, please like and subscribe, and don't forget to hit the notification bell, especially as I've got some upcoming projects in the pipeline. I'd also love to hear your thoughts on the video as well as what Rugby Australia are doing, so feel free to drop a comment below. Cheers.